Howdy everyone. Welcome back to my channel. This is A.R. Kavli, and these are the further adventures of Russel Miranda, Gunslinger. It's been a while since our last adventure, but it's the summer and I've been traveling. The audio may sound a little different as I'm recording in my new office now that my oldest son has moved out. And I'd like to thank my 101 subscribers. I'm like an official YouTuber now, it feels like. I got a notification from corporate that I had crossed the 100 threshold, 100 subscriber threshold. So thank you, and I hope those of you still listening will enjoy the further adventures of Russel Miranda, Gunslinger. Russel Miranda pulled on Ensign's reins, stopping at the edge of the great western forest. Hoary pines screened the woods beyond, as if trying to hide dark family secrets from the gunslinger's eyes. Bear nickered softly from behind. "I feel it too," Russel said. "The forest has eyes, but our path lies beyond." Bear did not answer. Russel spoke to his horses often. It disturbed him. This wasn't his first time riding the trail, though it was the longest. It had been almost 1 month since his battle in Taunton. Dreams of the ancient terror still woke him in the night. The last person Russel had spoken to was the old trapper who warned him of what lay in the great western forest. He looked down at the crumbs in his tobacco pouch and decided to enjoy his last smoke after dinner. All right, so I don't know what he was told, what exactly he's after at this point. From the map, we see that having gone from Taunton, he went down south through the gap between the Shaved Mountains and the Forest of Barony. There are some villages he passed along the way. Arton, which is where Gabriel Deshane is from. Serenity, Debaria, which features in Through the Wind Through the Keyhole. But I decided this time that Russel is going to be off doing a wilderness type of adventure. So first, let's decide what the thrust, what the main idea behind his adventure is. Five, 4. As we look at our 5, 4, okay, that gives us a punishment. And 2, 1. So a punishment and a barrier. The old trapper had told him about a wall of corpses that he'd come across. It had been set up recently along a path, along an area that the trapper had often worked. Russel, still being in the inner baronies, still performed his duty as a gunslinger, helping people out as he could, enforcing the affiliations laws, chasing down harriers. But he knew that his true goal was to get the Ghost Riders. And so recently, which is why he had been isolated, why he had not been going from town to town, he decided to let the local authorities, the local men, the marshals, the other gunslingers that were still riding patrol in these areas, he decided that it was really their job to take care of those things. He had been given orders by the din of the gunslingers himself. And so he asked about, he cast his nets wide looking for strange things, knowing that these stranger things would be more likely to lead him towards finding the Ghost Riders. And so when the trapper told him of these bodies, something in his gunslinger senses told him that this was something worthy of him investigating. So he headed down halfway between Beeley Town and Sallywood, as the trapper had said, and stopped. It was not too far into the forest from this point. Inside above the tree line, he could see a very tall oak that the top was dead, having been splintered and burned by a lightning strike. This was a tree that the trapper had described, so he knew he was in the right place. But the trapper couldn't tell him anything else. Russell remembered the fear in the trapper's eyes, just even thinking about it. All he said were there were skinned bodies lined up as if on a fence, or on posts, impaled on posts, as if making a gruesome picket fence marking off somebody's territory. And this is the affiliations territory. This is Gunslinger's territory still. And that's not something that a gunslinger would be doing. So Russell decides to break camp at the edge of the forest, finds places to crop his horses, opens up the can of beans that he had been gifted by someone a few weeks back, enjoys his dinner. They're mostly fresh. And sadly empties the remaining crumbs of his tobacco pouch into a ragged piece of cigarette paper and smokes the last cigarette he'll have for a while. Despite its scarcity, it doesn't bring him much comfort. He goes to sleep, and the next day breaks camp and heads inside. So next we're going to go ahead and use our TriCube Tales rules to kind of see, we're gonna decide what kind of landmark we have. We know it's in the forest already, so we're gonna see where he comes across these bodies here. Okay, 2-6. Edible fruit or plants. Creepy. he rides forth and he does find the bodies that the trapper was talking about. They are primitively dressed. They don't look like they're people that might be from Sallywood or Debaria, Salt Hills. Nothing of the inner baronies. Even the poorest people in the baronies would have some kind of homespun clothes, but these people are wearing very ragged furs. Their bodies have been slashed and stabbed, almost as if in anger, and each one impaled up their crotch, through their crotch, and left dangling like macabre scarecrows. Some are older, but most, he reckons, probably haven't been dead for more than a couple of weeks. As he examines the bodies, he notices that there are small piles of crab apples at their feet. Most of them are rotten and have been nibbled and eaten away at by some form of wildlife, or are infested with crawling insects who have been eating the pulp. But they're just sitting out there, almost as if an offering. He examines the bodies and sees that he examines 3 or 4 of these bodies, each who have been impaled on these large stakes, and they all have them. A couple of them only have the remains of what has been eaten, but it looks like with each body, a pile of these forest apples or crab apples were laid in between the feet. So his first task is going to be to look for some kind of clues other than that. So let's give him, because that's going to be crafty. That's going to be a crafty roll. I'll give that a difficulty of 5. All right. All right. So what kind of clue does he find? I'm going to say on a 5 or a 6, it's some kind of track, maybe a trail, something that will give him a hint as to the direction. On a 4, it will be something that he can identify the people with, that gives some kind of clue about who they are. Let's see. No, well, I don't want to test. I just want to test. Okay. So as he's looking at the bodies, he sees that there are marks, like some kind of tribal tattoos or something. Well, they're not like tattoos of ink, but of scarring along each of their forearms. And as he's looking at them, it kind of tells him that they are not just random victims. They somehow knew each other. And he walks up and down the line, and he sees that there's actually about 20 of these people in various states of decay that have been staked to the ground. Not all of them have apples. The older ones don't have apples. They've probably either decayed away or been eaten. But there's something in common with these people. Whoever has done this is trying to leave a message, maybe to everybody who passes through the woods, maybe just to these people. He's heard of the tribes, the primitive tribes, the ancient people who have lived in these woods for a long time, and in the other forests of Midworld. They're descendants of people who returned to a very primitive lifestyle as the world moved on. He is not as interested in enforcing the affiliation laws into this area as he is finding out who is performing these strange murders, although it makes for a good pretext. So he hops back on Ensign and rides past the dead bodies, rides through the corpse fence. One head seems to loll over as he passes, its empty eyes staring at him. He shudders, tries to remember the face of his father, and goes deeper into the forest. One hand on a big iron. All right, so here we're going to go ahead and decide what the scene, we'll decide what the next scene is that he has to overcome. Let's see. All right, so that is a standard brawny challenge. What would be a good standard brawny challenge involving the forest? Let's see if we can maybe get some inspiration from our solo tables for wilderness events. 6-3. Unusually hot or cold. Okay. I'm gonna roll dice 6 on a 5 or a 6. This is going to be some kind of supernatural or unexplainable, unnatural heat or cold, some kind of temperature shift. Otherwise, it's going to be just well, we'll see. All right. So as he is traveling through the woods, he suddenly feels lightheaded. He feels his skin starting to tingle a little bit, and he recognizes the sign of impending heat stroke. And as he's following this area past the gates, the forest is become very cloying and humid and hot. It's just very hot. And he has not really paid attention until almost it's too late. So his average challenge is going to be whether or not he suffers from some kind of exhaustion going through this area of the forest. It's very cloying. It seems like he has a hard time breathing, and it's very warm. So he's brawny, so that's a standard. So that's going to be a 5. Okay, so he gets an exceptional success. So good for him. He is able to recognize what's happening, and he starts shedding his cloak. he soaks a handkerchief with some of the water from his pouch, and he puts it over his head. He takes his hat off and he hangs it on his saddle horn to let himself cool off. He checks the horses to make sure that they're not suffering either, and they do seem to be flagging a little bit, but nothing like he is. So he decides to stop. And it seems almost like he's been traveling longer than he realizes. The sun seems to be in kind of a different place. I know it wasn't, the role was not to make it supernatural necessarily, but it still seems very strange. But he takes a rest, and as he's resting, making sure to get lots of water and to move to an area of the forest that is less uh, cloying, that's less um, that's not suffering from this strange heat. He will. Oh, I need to deal another. Standard Agile Challenge. Well, let's go ahead and use our D66 again. 4 and a 4. Sickness or injury. That's the wilderness event from the table. Well, let's see. It's an injury. Injury seems to fill more of a agile role, like trying to avoid injury or something. So, say as he is breaking camp, he's just on his horse. He just hops. He has just tied Bear to Ensign's saddle. It's still hot, so he's got his duster rolled up into his pack now. He's still wearing a wet cloth over his head, and he's got his hat pulled over to provide shade. And as they're moving along, he hears Bear whinny, and then he hears angry buzzing. And as he looks, he sees that Bear has kicked a log as he was walking around, and this swarm of giant mutated looking wasps are starting to swirl and they're starting to swarm, crawling out of the log like an angry army. And Russell knows what that means. It's time to go. Yeah, he kicks Ensign, and he shouts at Bear to get a move on because they've got to get out of there. These are not your old world wasps. These are mid-world wasps, giant and deadly. So that's going to be an average agility. Ooh, hope he makes this one. I'm not really a big fan of getting stung by wasps myself. Phew. All right. So he hears, he goes tearing through the trees, trying to find a path because it's a little tricky because Bear is tied to the horse. If he does anything too sharp, then he risks getting the horses tangled. One trying to go on one side of the tree and the other going the other, and then stopping everybody. He gets thrown and not a good time. But he manages to lead them through uh, different areas of forest with denser brush in hopes that that these deadly hornets won't follow. Um, he hears Bear nicker once or twice as the poor beast is stung, and even Ensign lets out a little cry of pain as one stings him. Uh, Russell sees it and reaches out and smashes the hornet. The thing's a little bit bigger than his thumb, and it splatters all over the horse's fur. But they tear through the forest and finally get away. Russell went after a long putting a good distance between himself and the last time he saw the swarm. Russell pulls up short and hitches the horses, make sure that there's no wasps still hanging around or crawling on any of the gear, and he takes out his little medical pouch and treats the sting areas as best as he can, which isn't all that much. All he can do is apply something that he hopes will ease the pain and the swelling, and he can already see where they've been stung, that the site, the injury is swollen like the size of a golf ball, very tender. He knows it'd be a lot worse if he'd been stung, but they do manage to escape. And as he looks around after their mad dash, he finds that they are now in a 2-5. They are in Crumbling Ruins, according to our little chart there. 2-5 for wilderness feature. So Crumbling Ruins. And I'm going to say that this Crumbling Ruin, probably a good chance, is either been visited or is in active use by whoever has put those bodies up front. I'm going to say on a 5 or a 6, it's either populated or a well-used source by those people or whomever's doing. Okay. So as he looks around, he doesn't even realize at first that he's in ruins because they're so moss covered and vine covered. The ruins look to be some old building, like old world building. There's not much left, just kind of an outline and maybe a knee-high wall, the remains of a knee-high wall. And as he realizes, as he first glimpses through the overgrowth, as he first glimpses the colors beneath, he sees that there's signs that these bushes have been moved, that some of this overgrowth, the overgrown vegetation, has been shifted back and forth very subtly, but he notices. And let's see what scene do these ruins bring to Russell Miranda. An easy brawny challenge. All right, so he looks around and he pulls one pistol out. Whoever is in this area operating is impaling people, so he feels he feels it wise to be ready for some kind of violence, which as a gunslinger he always is. He's able to find, as he walks around, he's able to find a place where most of it has been, or where the bushes have been moved back and forth the most. And what he finds is that there's kind of a wall of vines, and they're easy to pull across, or they're easy to move aside. And when they move aside, they reveal a door that leads down into the ground. Now the door itself is it's shut, it's locked, or maybe it's not locked, maybe it's just jammed, but it's beat up pretty good. But someone's been in there. He can see the signs. Being alone, he's not sure that he wants to just call out, but trying to open the door, he's obviously not going to be able to do it stealthily. So he's going to do what he always does. He's going to go in ready to fight. It's an easy brawny challenge. So as he's able to, the door obviously has some kind of latch, uh, and he can't reach. He can't reach the latch. He doesn't find a way. He tries to slip his knife in between as best as he can around the edges or anything like that. He's not been particularly stealthy. No one's come yet, so either they're hiding inside or no one's currently here. So he's just going to try to pull it open. Okay, so 2 successes. That's a exceptional success. So he puts his knife in its sheath and he holsters his gun. He gets himself as good of a hold as he can around one of the edges of the door, and he squats and he pulls and pulls, and one of the hinges, not the door where the 2 doors open, but one of the hinges pulls free with a loud squeal, and then the lower hinge, the other hinge of the door, twists out of the way, and Russel is able to move that door aside. And when he looks down, there's enough sunlight that goes down pretty far. He can see that there are stairs leading down into this old world, this old people structure of some kind. There, he sees on the side of the walls, going down the stairwell, he sees symbols in some writing. It's not the high speech or the low speech. So he believes it's something of theirs. Let's see, what's the nature of the ruins? We've already decided that it's old people ruins. So we'll use our urban location table here. Let's see what it gives us. All right, a 5-3. Ooh, a prison or a guardhouse. That seems kind of interesting. All right, so what he sees going down the side of the walls, most of the paint's gone, but there's like a red line that's going down, and there's some stenciled letters. They're worn. They're completely unreadable to him, and he doesn't think that he would even be able to read them if he could, or if they weren't so worn away. But he gets his pistol out and he goes down. He can see that there's signs of coming and going up and down the stairs. And as he looks, he sees that the door does have some kind of latch across it. All right, so that's 3 successful challenges. So Russel's doing all right. All right, what is the nature? Um, so he's chasing after some kind of supernatural hints, looking for signs of the red, signs of the outer darkness, signs of things that might attract or be caused the um, by the Ghost Riders. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to roll a die 66 again, and a 6 and a 2. And I'm just going to go down the list through these little solo table things here and see what strikes my fancy. All right, so if I look at the urban table, soldier or mercenary, maybe. Look at the wilderness folk. Ooh, stalker or predator. Now I know that's wilderness, so it's kind of thinking it's probably talking about predator animal, but I'm thinking maybe predator something else. Okay, 6-2 on the um, dungeon denizens table is a vampire or a mummy. Also interesting. A vampire stalker? Maybe some kind of both. Yes. Which would, of course, why else would there be something living underground in the darkness in a place that's locked up during the day? Except that they are some kind of vampire. A vampire stalker, a vampire who's been stalking these simple people, this tribe. Sounds good to me. As he recalls looking back, well, let's see. Now he would not know yet. He knows there's something. He knows there's something down there, and he can smell uh, death and decay from coming down there, from coming up, and he knows his gunslinger instinct is telling him that whatever is down there is responsible for the fence. And I guess we don't really have to understand why a vampire would make fences. But of course, this does not have to be. This is midworld. This is a different level of the tower. Vampires, especially if you read like the Little Sisters of Illyria, uh, vampires aren't necessarily always your standard trope vampires. But so he continues down the steps, and as it gets deeper and deeper, he's got one pistol in his hand, and he takes his wet cloth and he puts it over his face to try to stop the stench, the overpowering stench. And he comes around the corner, and there's still enough light that's getting down there that he can see in the distance as he goes around the corner. It's it's strewn with old world junk and debris, smashed furniture, some kind of strange uh, glass devices that have been smashed on the floor, old keyboards. There's even something that's a little green light that's just blinking on and off up down in the corner. He has no idea what it is, but he has drawn instead. Those details only flash through his mind. Instead, his eyes are drawn to the center of the room, there's a body laying flaccid on the floor, its limbs spread obscenely, blood all over it, having run down also on its uh, primitive fur clothing. But next to it is, now it is a vampire, and the Dark Tower kind of has three, maybe four types of vampires, which Father Callahan unimaginatively explains as type 1, 2, or 3. Um, and as Russell thinks back to his schooling on the cursed vampires, he knows that one type of vampire is so ancient and powerful that they look monstrous, not like the creature he sees before him now. And that if it were that kind of vampire, what some of the ancient texts, what some of the wise men call the grandfathers, that he's dead already. And he knows that there are vampires who look human, and the sun doesn't affect them. They're not as strong as the other vampires, and they would not need to hide away in the daylight. So this is either going to be what the Dark Tower calls a type 1, which is the very powerful, more typical Dracula kind of vampire. And then a type 2 vampire is more of a thrall. They're powerful and they drink blood. Both of those are burned by the sun. But the type 2 vampires are, they get out of control. They give into their hunger. They don't think, they're not as clever. And so they end up being short lived because they end up doing, giving themselves away and being hunted down. The behavior from what we've seen with the bodies, that seems more like a type 2 kind of thing. But type 1s are more powerful. And this one obviously has been able to do something with the, it has taken down a lot of whoever these villagers are, this primitive tribe. I'm going to say on a 5 or a 6, it's going to be a type 1 vampire, which will be either way. Either way, I think this vampire is going to be some kind of big boss. So, I mean, it's got to be a boss, right? And so he's not going to be something that Roland's just going to be able to walk in there and shoot, defeat with some lucky rolls or anything like that. On a 5 or 6, it's a type 1. Everything else is going to be one of these type 2 vampires. Oh, okay. So it's a 6. So this vampire is, let's see, 1 through 3 female. Okay, so this vampire is staring at him. She's beautiful, alluring. And as he catches her eyes, he sees that she's smiling. She has these red, full lips, very voluptuous. And she is dressed not like those primitive tribesmen. She's actually dressed more like a side wife, a Jilly, if you will, of a powerful Gilead noble. Her clothes are rich and well made, but they're a bit more revealing than what a decent woman of the court would wear. And her eyes are glowing dimly. And as Russell begins to stare, he can feel himself being lost. He can feel her commanding him to come forward, to come out of the sunlight, because he's still in just a little bit of sunlight at the bottom of the steps as he came around the corner. Come, Gunslinger. You have invaded my home. It's very sweet that you would come to visit me. Come, sit with me. Lay with me. Give me your blood, child of Arthur L. And her lips part in a smile, and he can see her fangs. And this is going to be, this is tricky. Because she's pretty powerful. He knows his mind. He's trying to break away. He's trying to break free. He knows, and even though he thought he got the drop on her, even though in his mind he knows that these these bloodsuckers are supposed to be weakest during the day, he feels that he's slipping away. So him trying to resist this, I'm going to say it's going to be it's got to be difficult. She's a powerful type 1 vampire, and he's come across her. He's completely unprepared. I'm going to change that to difficulty 6. Instead of drawing, I'm just going to go with the next challenge is the crafty. Oops. 6, there we go. Oh. Not sure why it rolled twice, but no. And even if he had something, it's very difficult. So oops. He's definitely losing resolve. And he takes a step forward. And another. He feels something slap into his cheek, like he gets punched. And it snaps him out, and he looks up, and there is one of these. He looks up, and there's someone at the top of the steps, and he's stunned between the vampire's influence and the pain that's on his cheek. And he looks down, and he sees a crab apple is still rolling back and forth at his feet. He looks up at the person who threw it, and it's one of these primitive people dressed in furs. Actually, they're more hides than furs. This one, and he's a tall man, and he's got a primitive bow slung over his shoulder, a knife at his belt. And he's desperately waving him up the steps. He's shouting something, but Roland doesn't know what language he's speaking, but he's motioning him up the steps. And he hears from the room, the feminine hiss, anger, and he wants to look, but he knows better. He knows better than to look, and so he immediately starts bounding up the stairs again, but she's not having it. She's going to try to stop him or hurt him or do something, and so Roland is going to have to face another challenge. Let's see what kind of challenge he has to face to escape as she's up and moving. Oh, a king. Advanced main plot. Positive. Okay, so well, at least that's good for him. All right, standard brawny challenge. So as we're advancing the main plot, in this case, I've treated the search for the Ghost Riders as kind of as the secondary plot, um, just because he's looking for clues still. So the main plot in this is, well, it is going to be finding this. Well, he's found the source. He's found who is killing these tribesmen, and he doesn't understand why anything yet, but he now knows that that it's her, and that she is a powerful vampire, and so he advances that plot by he's now certain, even though he can't understand what this person is screaming at him, he knows that she is the one that's responsible, and she's a vampire from the books of old, from the tales of his, that his father used to tell him to scare him at night. And he hopes that the part about them not liking the sunlight is true as he bounds up the steps. But as he's just about to get up there, he feels her iron grip on him, on his shoulder, on his shirt, trying to pull him back down. He looks over and he can see that her hand is starting to smoke, and she is grunting in pain as she's trying to pull him back, pull him out of the shadow. And she's just, her face, her grinning face, and her fangs are just inches away around the corner out of the sunlight as she's trying to pull. And so the task of the standard was standard, wasn't it? Yeah, her standard brawny challenge is going to be him trying to get out of her grasp and up the steps. All right, well, fortunately, he's strong and it's standard. Okay, whoo, barely. So he manages to jerk himself free. He feels the cloth on his shirt give way, and it rips loudly, and she immediately hisses in anger, and he runs up the steps, and he casts one final look, and he sees her smoking hand slither back out of the sunlight and into the darkness. And he gets to the top of the steps. This hunter, this primitive warrior who threw the apple at him to break him out of the trance, continues. He's waving him on, and he runs off. And of course, Russel, he runs to his horses outside of the ruins. He runs to them. He unlashes Ensign and follows after this man. He doesn't even give him a chance to ride or whatever. He doesn't know this man, even though he saved him. He doesn't know if he can ride. So he follows after the man, who is very fast, very agile, and he's running through the trees. And soon Russell is away. Russell's away, having just barely escaped. He realizes of having his blood sucked by this powerful vampire seductress. And in fact, he shakes his head because he keeps seeing her. He keeps seeing how beautiful she is. She's beckoning to him. Then he has to shake his head again. And he comes out. He follows the man through a final copse of trees, ducking as the horses pick their way through. And he finds that he's at the edge of a village of sorts. There are very primitive huts and animals, and a general pall of despair and terror over everyone he sees. There's not that many left. The warrior, the hunter, motions him on to the house that's in the center of the village. It's raised up on stilts, and sitting at the top of a small walkway up to the hut, there's a wrinkled old man and a wrinkled old woman. And the man says, "Welcome, Gunslinger. It has been long and long since one of your ilk has passed this way." And we'll call it there. All right, well, I wasn't really expecting to get some kind of vampire in there, but hey, how about that? Anyway, we'll go ahead and call it there. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time. Happy gaming.